Welcome everyone to Frank Analysis. My name is Franco. We have some breaking news today. The Green Party of Alaska intends to have Governor Jesse Ventura on the ballot as its nominee. I have Richard Idriss here from Draft Jesse. So Richard, supposedly Howie Hawkins won the nomination despite strong allegations of the party and his campaign colluding to rig the primaries. I personally do not want to vote for Howie because of the apparent rigged process and some of his comments on Assange and foreign policy and him backing away from that, backtracking, rather than owning up to his mistakes. So what are your thoughts on this news? And also, how are you doing? It's great to have you on here.
I'm doing well, hanging in there with the heat here in Northern California and the gross air still. So now it just smells like debris.
Sorry to hear about all that, man.
We're like in the pocket where none of the fires are right near us. We just get inundated with smoke. So I miss fresh air.
Yeah, hopefully it clears up, but who knows?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this news, man? This is some great news for people who are enthusiastic about, voting for Jesse.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I was warning folks in the Green Party that something like this could happen as far back as May, when doing research into what happened with the Nader process. When Nader was nominated in 1996, there was a divide in the party between folks who didn't think the Green Party should engage in electoral politics at all, and different state parties who thought that, hey, they had nothing to lose by nominating someone who was popular. Mm-hmm. So that movement started with the state party of California putting Nader at the top of their presidential ballot, and other parties followed suit. And I warned them parties might do it this cycle, and it looks like there's a movement amongst different state Green parties to secede from GPUS. I've heard talks about Arizona. I know Oklahoma is pretty unsatisfied with the national leadership, and it's pretty obvious with Alaska what's going on there. But I mean, you even have issues with Montana, where they voted for none of the above, and then they ended up having all of their ballot access stripped in court recently in a pretty undemocratic way. Apparently, there were Republicans that were backing the Green Party's ballot access there. Rhode Island, at a protest, didn't nominate Hawkins because they thought he was a waste of time. North Carolina, Hawkins was the only person on the ballot, nearly lost to none of the above. Like there's energy within the party for someone else to take the reins, and our movement after the GPUS convention actually moved on largely. We started work on an independent write-in campaign to try and catch the governor's attention, and we've had some success with that. We helped coordinate his appearance for both the People's Party and the Unity 2020 interview he did recently with Brett Weinstein. That was courtesy of one of our volunteers, who's a techie guy who lives in Minnesota. So he got together with Jesse and helped make that happen. So we've had some success there, but this came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But it was great news to see. We're hoping that is some inspiration for some other state parties to follow suit, whether they're Green Party or others. It also gives us clarity as to who we should probably pick as our vice presidential nominee when seeking electors in California. In California, you can get a candidate approved write-in access regardless of whether or not they sign paperwork. The example I always go to is Sanders and Gabbard were a ticket in 2016 you could vote for here, and it showed up in the voter info pamphlets and everything, and neither of them signed paperwork or wanted it. So we're getting the folks together here in California. Now we've got some guidance as to who would be a VP pick. Obviously McKinney, that way it's in line with what Alaska's done. And it gives us the opportunity, too, to deny 270 electoral votes to either of the major party candidates and make a statement, even without getting approved write-in access in a ton of states. There's about 10 places where write-in access is a go-ahead no matter what. Plus California, plus Alaska would be more than enough for folks to protest vote against the establishment. Obviously, we want this to spill upward into more access as well, hopefully by getting this news directly to the governor and into the media. But even if it winds up being a potential protest vote, it's now tied to a party, which means it could get party ballot access in California, or in Alaska, excuse me. going forward. And, I mean, with the oil exports from Alaska, it would be a statement for an environmental party to take over a state that's had a history of oil extraction. It'd be a nice place to start. There's lots of vets there who are disillusioned with both of the major parties, people trying to get off the grid. So I think there's a lot of potential from this moment.
It's great to hear that people are now waking up and seeing the truth behind both parties. You know, they're both corporatists. They're not doing anything to help any of us out. So it was really disheartening for me, like when I heard a lot of those corporatist talking points by Howie Hawkins, especially in that interview with Primo Nutmeg. And then him using the excuse that he was tired, even though he was pretty coherent when he made those comments. And when he won the nomination, like for the Green Party, does that mean that he is supposed to be on the ballot for every state that gets ballot access for the Green Party?
So the Green Party itself is actually very decentralized, and this is where it comes back to bite them, because they use this excuse to get around how some Green Party in the South, I think it was South Carolina, but don't quote me on that. It might have been Georgia. Had an anti-LGBTQ plank of their platform, and GPUS disowned it by saying, yeah, but we're decentralized. They can do whatever they want. What that also means is these state parties have a lot of control over who gets their ballot access lines. And the same can be said for the Libertarian Party. In 2000 and 2004, there were multiple Libertarian nominees. The only time the FEC ever cared was when they had to give matching funds to a campaign. So they wanted to know which one was the official party campaign. But there's definitely precedent for parties to run more than one presidential nominee in the general if there's a schism in the party. And I mean, Dario kept running too. So right now it looks like it could be a three-way split within the Greens because of the hubris of Hawkins to hold on to the rigged nomination process.
You think Dario would rather have Jesse than Howie?
I would hope so. I get the vibe that Dario was just waiting for Jesse to explicitly say he was going to enter before he really wanted to engage with him. He always kind of brushed off our volunteers. He said, you know, it's a good movement and all, but he's not running, which kind of discredits the whole grassroots component of the Green Party, right? Like that, you don't get much more grassroots than folks banding together to draft a candidate themselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was always our response to that. It would be interesting for sure. He was tweeting earlier today about the possibilities that means for the party.
Yeah, he wanted to hear the opinion from other people also. So for the people that don't know, can you tell us a bit more about what the Draft Jesse movement is, how it got started, and what the main goal of the movement is?
Definitely. So the People for Jesse, Draft Jesse Ventura PAC, which is our official legal FEC filing name, got started in early mid-May. It was like the weekend of the 16th or something like that. When it came about from some volunteers, including myself, in a previous PAC that was started called We Want Jesse, started to kind of flounder and had some organizational issues. So we had formed a parallel PAC to also support getting Jesse Ventura the Green Party nomination. And this all started because in last week of April, Jesse Ventura made a surprise announcement saying he wanted to test the waters regarding a presidential run. And within that week, polled at 18% in a Fox News poll that you can no longer find online. I have the screenshot of an MSN poll where he polled at 11% that you can also no longer find online. I wish I would have found the Fox one. Jesse always references it. But he tested the waters. He filed a letter of interest, I should clarify, with the Green Party. And folks formed around the exploratory committee, the We Want Jesse PAC, which was the original Draft Jesse PAC. Like I said, there were some organizational issues. They had volunteers campaigning in New York, despite it being clear to Green Party leadership that they were not going to accept new registrants. They went with December 31st, 2019 as the registration deadline. And some context, we had a volunteer when we were working with them recruit over 130 brand new Green Party voters, which would have put Jesse in first or second place in the New York primary. And they discounted all of them using that registration deadline. And the leadership of the We Want Jesse PAC just either was never aware of that or never thought it was important to inform volunteers. So that's when we realized we needed to form our own organization to help as well if we wanted to make sure things got off the ground. And so that is when our founder, Melissa, signed the FEC filing paperwork, made it official, and we launched our website, posted our first ad, and it's been a grassroots campaign since then to get Jesse Ventura a nomination or a pathway to campaign and win the presidency this November.
That's great. And so this news now that he's on the ballot in Alaska, this is interesting because this is after Jesse's speech at a Movement for a People's Party's People's Convention, in which he said in his speech that he's not making a campaign announcement. In that moment, he was not making an announcement. He did not say he was not going to run, just that this was not an announcement. So what did you think of his speech, and what did you think of that whole event overall?
So I've caught a decent chunk of it. I need to go back and finish watching the rest, but I did get to see Jesse's speech right before I was on the Unity Now 2020 podcast as part of the Unity 2020 campaign. But from what I saw of the People's Party convention, I was satisfied with some of the statements, but admittedly not very happy that they were okay with speakers outright saying we're going to vote for Biden because we have to. You're trying to form a new party. Don't tell us to vote for the main candidate for the Dems. I already thought that vote your conscience was a pretty weak statement from a movement that's supposed to be a party. But then the platform speakers that are pushing to vote for Biden just kind of, that's a knife twisting in the gut of anyone who really wanted Sanders to win and watched the rigged process happen. So in that regard, I'm a little disillusioned with their choice of speakers. Mm-hmm. But I thought that Jesse provided a really great rebuttal to that, which is, you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're still choosing evil.
Yeah.
And the central message of that was really on point about how this is going to be a project. It's not something that's won in one election cycle, even if you win the presidency, because the two major parties will start to work against you. And you got to be ready for that whole can of worms as well.
Yeah, I thought it was funny how you had people speaking, being very critical of Bernie, being very critical of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, saying that they're not going to vote for either. But then you had another speaker coming on and said, this is why I'm supporting, the Democrats right now because we can't afford Trump. And then them citing a speech from Michelle Obama. I just thought it was interesting, but I understand it because they're trying to garner as many people as they can with different strategies for what they want to do for the election. So I can understand, they don't want to alienate more people, but I do want to talk about that a little bit more later on, about their outreach approach. But right now I want to ask you, why is Jesse the best person to run for president right now in 2020? And I'm asking to hear more about character as well as policy.
Yeah, I think personally that in this historic moment, there's not another leader out there who has the combination of experience, political acumen, and character needed to beat the two giant stinking piles of shit that are the Democratic and Republican nominees. There's a great paper out there. It's called Where Has the Jesse Ventura Voter Gone? It's a Creighton study that outlined the exact political context of the Minnesota governor's election that Jesse won. And he entered with about 90 days left. He was polling at 8%, got into one debate, and his polling numbers skyrocketed because he's authentic. Mm-hmm. One of the most important things that was central to his run in those debate performances was there was a question that was asked of him about an ironworkers union, up in the mountains, the mines in Minnesota. And his response was just, I don't know about that, but if I'm elected, I'll learn about it. And the audience went wild because it was a politician admitting they're fallible. Like we got so many folks who get up there and they campaign like we're electing a god or like the Pope.
Right.
And we're supposed to assume that they never make a mistake. And so having the humility to admit that, and he backed it up by having a cabinet that was it crossed party lines and just included folks who were experts. And everyone who was in his cabinet raved about Jesse as a boss because he was very hands off and let them manage what they were good at. And his court appointments were also very popular amongst the legal community in Minnesota. They still have a lasting impact today. I think one of his Minnesota Supreme Court judges is retiring this year, is my understanding. Mm. But so the man is willing to cross party lines to ally with folks who have the best interests of the people in mind. And his political visions have evolved over the years in ways that I think echo that, right? My favorite example of this is how when we've pitched Jesse Ventura to folks who are far left, they say he's too right. When we pitch Jesse Ventura to folks who are on the right, they say he's too left. And it's because they're drawing on different policies that he's advocated that show that the left-right divide in this country is BS.
Right.
It's possible to be for a limited government that helps people but is limited in destructive capabilities.
Yeah.
Jesse Ventura is all about shrinking the military and using that money elsewhere, which I think is a great idea. One of my favorite points that he's brought up in recent months is taking the basically the blank check that the Department of Defense gets and using it to buy machines to dredge the oceans of plastic and just repurpose part of the Navy to clean the oceans. And there's a couple reasons why I like that policy. Not only is it a practical way to help fix part of the problem, which is our needless pollution of the oceans, but it puts Congress in a bind because you know they're going to want to hamstring the agenda of an independent president. And what are they going to do? Not approve the military budget?
Right.
That's going to piss off their donors.
Yeah.
And if they don't approve the military budget, that's going to let Jesse spin convincing Congress to cut the military budget, which would be a win in the eyes of the people anyways. We're sick of all the shit that we do abroad. We ought to bring some of that home. The money, not the weapons, damn it.
Yeah.
And the other route, say they give him the funding, he gets to say he used the military to clean up the environment, which would also be a win. So it's that kind of strategic thinking that would put the establishment sort of behind. We got to be thinking one step ahead. And I think that the strategic mind that Jesse brings to the table would be the way to do that. I mean, Sanders and Trump both kind of aped a lot of his ethos and strategy just by holding rallies. But only Trump was really willing to go that extra mile of people like to say, oh, Trump tells it like it is, and that's why I like to vote for him. And Jesse kind of gives off that same vibe, but in an authentic way, and in a way where it seems like he cares about people. Folks forget that Trump won promising health care and to end the wars, not just build a wall. Mm-hmm. It's just 4 years of Democratic propaganda kind of concealed those facts when they could have run a campaign on how Trump was a liar.
Yeah, and Jesse has evidence to back up, his honesty. I mean, you look and see like that he is someone who's really genuine. And I do remember that, when the crowd cheered when he said, I don't know, like that's so honest rather than making up some bullshit answer, which is what a lot of politicians say. And that makes people feel like they're being used, which is why a lot of people are so disappointed with Bernie now, because he's telling them to go vote for, the people that he's been supposedly fighting against, like Biden, who represents the corporations. So, people feel like they're being used and they don't see him as an honest person like they did originally when they were introduced to him back in 2015 or 2016. We need more people like Jesse to be running for president and to be running for any office in general. I heard your interview with Graham Elwood. You guys were talking about the Unity 2020, who selected the 6 candidates to be a part of the primary process. Jesse is one of those people. Tulsi Gabbard is also one of those people. So can you let some folks know here what the Unity 2020 is and what their plan is?
Yeah, so Unity 2020 was a movement that was started by Brett Weinstein, who considers himself part of the intellectual dark web. And I mean, you can take from that what you want, but it's a lot of people who are concerned with political correctness, which in a lot of ways means that they cut out of a different crowd from like MPP. They're more like moderate and right leaning, basically. So the Unity 2020 movement's goal was to offer a third party ticket for folks to vote for in November that combines someone from the left and someone from the right in a productive dialogue. And they wouldn't decide up front who would be president and vice president. Their idea was to pick it via coin flip. I think you ought to vote for that, but maybe that's just me. And so they picked as their three potential left candidates Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, and Jesse Ventura, and as their potential right candidates Dan Crenshaw, Jocko Willink, and General McRaven. They had a primary vote yesterday, which had a cutoff for registration the week prior that they announced via email to an email list. Actually, pretty quick after my Graham Elwood interview. It was almost like the moment that we started encouraging Jesse Ventura people to sign up, they decided to close off the ability for folks to register. I've also gotten a number of screenshots from folks who, when they submitted their ballot, they ranked all the Jesse Ventura tickets as their top three choices, and then for some reason Andrew Yang ended up being their number one after clicking submit. So it's that there was a whole series of messes with their primary voting process yesterday that a lot of folks aren't very happy with, regardless of whether Ventura was their number one pick or not. But the spirit behind the movement was an interesting one, and one that we thought was worthwhile engaging with, regardless of our own personal political proclivities. Like, I'm not a person who's going to go out and campaign for Dan Crenshaw. The guy's got too many right-wing views. I'm an Arab American, and I don't know if he likes me. Not that I really care about his personal opinion of me.
I don't know if he likes me either, as a Hispanic American. But
yeah,
I saw that.
You know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I remember that interview where he, like on Joe Rogan or whatever, I forgot what he said, but it was completely ridiculous, and a lot of people were like bashing him for those comments. But yeah, I wouldn't campaign for him.
Just like we're making doctors slaves with Medicare for all. What? So does that mean? I mean, we do have slaves for firefighters, but that's just because they're prisoners.
Yeah, and we have like slave wages, especially in other countries. So.
Yeah.
So a criticism that I hear a lot from some people about Movement for a People's Party, so going back to that, is that they don't do enough to unite people outside of burners. And I hear this a lot from some of my friends who are, I guess I guess you can consider them progressive. Some of them are outsiders. However, I have heard that they reached out to Tulsi, but she couldn't make it. They also reached out and managed to get Nico House as a speaker, and he was a supporter of Tulsi Gabbard. He was a surrogate for her. They had Chris Hedges on, who gave very strong criticisms against Bernie. And they even had Jesse on. So I've even heard people say that it looks like they aren't trying enough to integrate Unity 2020. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on these criticisms of Movement for a People's Party.
I mean, I think that last criticism is probably the most salient one in my mind, is we have two burgeoning new third-party movements right now, and their leadership are not communicating.
Yeah.
And both of them are ostensibly about giving an option that appeals to a broad swath of the country, not a very small demographic slice. So why aren't Nick Brana and Brett Weinstein on the phone talking about how they could ally? What utility do we get out of waiting until 2022 and 2024? I'm with those folks. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Are we honestly going to be in a situation where there are nominees that poll worse than Trump and Biden in 2024? I don't know. What happens if it's What happens if it's Kamala Harris and AOC that are the Democratic nominees potentially? Does all Bernie-dom just fall back in line with the DNC and watch the same shit happen again and then give up in the summer again? I'm very concerned that if we don't start now, we're not going to have things together by then. I feel that.
Yeah, we really got to push them to get them to talk. I think Nick is open enough to be inclusive of enough people from what his views are, and him being able again to bring people on like Nico, Chris Hedges, etc., and even Jesse Ventura. He sees that there is a big appeal for Jesse Ventura. So I am really happy that he was able to bring on all these different perspectives, despite me not agreeing with some of those, like, you know, what people like Marianne Williamson was saying and her bringing up Michelle Obama. But I mean, I understand it, like I said. So is there anything else you want to share before we close off here?
Is there anything else the main thing is just this news about Alaska is huge. And I would definitely encourage people to stay tuned to what develops out of that. There's still...
I was going to ask you, do you think that other states are going to follow along now after this?
I hope so. We're certainly going to try and help make that happen at this point. We weren't involved in him getting drafted in Alaska, which I think kind of underscores that there's a lot of popular demand for him now that the word has gotten out. And that's exciting. So we're going to start reaching out to state parties pretty quick here. We've got to figure out ones that are open. I know a volunteer told me earlier the Grassroots Party in Minnesota has not yet picked a nominee for their ballot line. So that could be a way to get Jesse on the ballot in his own home state. We are also still collecting electors, pledged electors as volunteers in different states. We're going to send out info this week on California. So if folks want information on where to go to volunteer and get more info, go to draftjesse.com and sign up for our newsletter for calls to action, and check out the volunteer page where you can put in your info to sign up to be an elector. Basically, those are the folks who cast the vote for your state's electoral college of votes in December once the election results are finalized. Chances are this year it'll be largely online, but worst case scenario, folks would convene at their state capitals. If that's the case, we would help fund travel expenses. We've got deadlines coming up for Massachusetts and Georgia, where we're going to need electors. That would require Jesse's signature on those papers, so we're hoping that when we get him this info about Alaska, that inspires him to more directly enter the ring. Yeah. Otherwise, we still have to keep going with these states where unapproved write-ins are allowed, like California. And there's a number of others as well where there isn't any paperwork involved. So regardless, I would say there's going to be an option for a lot of people in November to vote at a protest. And what does that look like? Well, say there's a couple of realistic scenarios where if a third-party nominee were to win a few small states, or to win, say, California, which I know is a big one, but if you look at evidence like the United States of Apathy, which is a great map, it shows how many folks just didn't vote who could have, and California is one of those states where non-voters outnumber voters. So getting them a candidate they might like could result in this. But say a write-in candidate wins a state like California, it could potentially set up a scenario where 270 is impossible for either the Republican or the Democratic nominee. And that means that the presidential and vice presidential slots are decided by the House and the Senate respectively. So to folks who are worried about a spoiler campaign happening, that's what I say. The worst case scenario is no one gets 270 and the House picks Biden as president anyways. So why are you upset if your vote blue no matter who? Right.
Yeah.
So I think voting your conscience is a great thing to do in November, and we're going to try and make that happen.
Mm-hmm. And regardless, there's still write-ins. And I remember he said that, and I think it was on Primo Nutmeg, where he's like, I don't like any of these other candidates, so I'm going to write myself in because I think I'm the best option. So he was saying, like, if people write in his name enough and he wins like that, then he's just going to take the job anyway, right? I think it was Primo Nutmeg that where
Yeah,
he said that.
that was his primo interview. But things that people should keep in mind: every time Jesse has run, it's been because of popular draft. He's never wanted to run and just declared. It's always been popular demand getting him to finally file paperwork. So,
Yeah. All right. So Richard Idriss of Draft Jesse. One more time, where can people find you?
well, you can check me out on Twitter at Idriss Richard. Make sure to check out the Draft Jesse movement at draftjesse.com and follow us on Twitter at People4Jesse, the number 4. And also sign up for our newsletter for future calls to action and updates. We have a change.org petition that's still going on, but it's mostly used nowadays to get in contact with previous signers because it was meant for the Green Party leadership. You can sign up there too. The best place to get updates, though, is our newsletter. So I would say that draftjesse.com, sign up for the newsletter, sign up to volunteer. Check us out on Twitter, People4Jesse.
All right, Richard. Thanks again for coming on. Much appreciated. Look forward
Yeah,
to
thanks
having
for
you on
having me
again.
on.